Thank you for listening to WBHM Digital Broadcasting out of Birmingham, Alabama. The time is 23 minutes after the hour.
Welcome back from our second commercial break. This is Paraversal Universe on WBHM Digital Broadcasting. Also heard on WCET 101.7 FM, Amelia Pisano Productions, and the Rift Radio Network. We're your hosts, Kevin and Jennifer Malik. Before we get back to the show, we want to tell you all that we are on Twitter as the NWPS, and MeWe as Paraversal Universe. Our like and group pages on Facebook are under various headings as well. Having said that, check out our Society's like page on Facebook, the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited, as well as Jennifer's like page, Jennifer Malik, Psychic Demonologist. And there are two Facebook group pages on Facebook we want you to check out. The Ultimate Conspiracies group page is one, and the Lake Monstrosities group page is another. Feel free to join them both. We would love to see you there. In fact, also check out the Zombie Plesiosaur Society on Facebook, Scott's group page, and of course the like pages for the networks that we are affiliated with. Each network has a like page and or a group page, so feel free to give them a like or join. So this segment is brought to you by the book Trail of the Sasquatch, A Shaman's Journey by cryptozoologist and Iroquois shaman Don Young, who is also a member of the NWPS. Check out his Facebook groups Kindred Forest and Indigenous Americas. Any comments for this week's show can be addressed in the live chat room. Let's get back to the interview. This is Paraversal Universe, and we are talking to our very good friend, cryptozoologist Scott Mardis from the Zombie Plesiosaur Society. Are you still with us, Scott?
Yes, and picking up where I left off, the land rose and cut off the marine influence on the Champlain Sea, roughly 10,000 years ago. So when this happened, whatever was living in the Champlain Sea had to either die or adapt to fresh water. And over the years, over the course of the last 10,000 years, portions of what was the Champlain Sea got filled in with sediment. And what is left of the Champlain Sea today is the upper part of the St. Lawrence River, the Richelieu River, the Ottawa River, and what is now Lake Champlain. We know that some of the fish that are currently living in Lake Champlain, based on genetic studies, are leftovers from fish that were living in the Champlain Sea. So these particular types of fish, the Atlantic salmon, the sea lamprey, the rainbow smelt, these are all relics from the Champlain Sea. So we know that some of the animals that were living in the Champlain Sea were able to survive the transition to fresh water and stay in there from the time of the Champlain Sea. Now, they have found whale and seal bones, mostly beluga whales, from Champlain Sea deposits. Probably the most famous is what is called the Charlotte whale. It's the skeleton of a 10,000-year-old or 11,000-year-old beluga whale that was found in 1849 in Charlotte, Vermont. They were digging for a railroad and found this whale skeleton up on a bluff. And the reason they found it up on a bluff is that bluff, during the time of the Champlain Sea, was the shoreline. This beluga whale had washed up on shore and got buried by sand, and the water level had gone down like 200 feet from the time of the Champlain Sea. Therefore, this previous seashore became a bluff up on a hill, which is fascinating too, you know.
Right.
most of the fossils from the Champlain Sea are found up in southern Quebec and southern Ontario. Besides the whale skeleton found at Charlotte, they have found another one over in a place called Norfolk, New York, which is over in western New York State. They found 14 other ones up in Quebec and Ontario. So altogether, there are 16 beluga whale skeletons from Champlain Sea deposits. And they've also found remains of larger whales. There's a type of baleen whale called the bowhead whale. They found fossils of it too. So there were also big whales living in the Champlain Sea. They found seal bones in Plattsburgh, New York, which is on the other side of the lake from the Vermont side. So the idea is, this is the geologic history of the lake. So you have, regardless of whether you believe there's a monster or a resident population of creatures in the lake now, these are the two facts. At one point in time, it was marine, and there were large marine animals living in it. And point number two, there are fish living in the lake now that managed to survive the transition from saltwater to freshwater. So theoretically, if there was a larger animal that managed to survive that transition that we don't know about, that could possibly be a resident population of monsters or unknown creatures or whatever you choose to call them. So there is a theoretical substructure for the idea that scientifically something could be in there, and it could have come from the ocean. And it's very difficult to think of some kind of large animal coming from the ocean up rivers now, because in the present day there are all these dams and canal systems that obstruct the marine connections from modern-day Lake Champlain to the Atlantic Ocean. It's actually connected in two places to the Atlantic Ocean, on the northern end through the Richelieu River and the St. Lawrence River, and on the southern end by the man-made Champlain-Hudson Canal, which connects to the Hudson River that comes out in Long Island Sound at New York City. So anything trying to get in and out of the lake now would have to negotiate all those obstructions.
Right.
So that makes me think that if there is an animal in Lake Champlain that we don't know about, there's most likely a resident population of them that has been in there since the time of the Champlain Sea. Now that idea carries its own set of problems like genetic inbreeding, and would there be enough individuals in there to sustain a healthy population? Now, one piece of evidence that I can point to that might give us some insight into that question is that there is a resident population of lake sturgeons in Lake Champlain that have been in there since not long after the end of the Champlain Sea. They've been in there at least, they think, 8,000 years. They would have migrated from the west through the Great Lakes from the Mississippi River region. So genetic studies on the lake sturgeons suggest that there has always been a historical population of about 3,000 adult animals. Now, the significance of that is that, according to ecological theory, to sustain a population, a healthy population of animals over time, you have to have a population of 500 individuals over the long run and 50 individuals over the short run. So looking at what we know about the lake sturgeons, 3,000 is 6 times that 500 animals that you need to sustain a population over a long period of time.
That's a really good point.
That is.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I'm using real ecological theory here to
Right.
theorize about this hypothetical monster. All right, now, the lake sturgeons in Lake Champlain are very rarely seen. They're protected. They're supposedly endangered. Now, they're so rarely seen that the New York Wildlife Department, division of the, what do you call them? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm having a brain blank here, but the Wildlife Fisheries
Fish and Game
Management. Fish and Game, yeah. New York Fish and Game actually have a hotline for people to call in with sturgeon sightings. They're so rarely encountered over on the New York side of the lake. So, okay, they have a historical population of 3,000 animals, adult animals. That's not including the juveniles. And are very rarely seen. The ones that you see in aquariums in Vermont are not from the lake. They are from Lake Winnebago, which is up your way. Lake Winnebago has a healthy population of lake sturgeons that are not endangered. And in fact, people go out every year and spear fish for them.
Right. Jeff Stenz was
so
just
they're
on
not
a
endangered. The
show
ones in Wisconsin. But the ones that you see in the aquarium at the Echo Center in Vermont are taken from Lake Winnebago because the ones in Lake Champlain are so rarely seen. But anyway, getting back to my point is that they estimate there's a population of something like 3,000 of these fish probably in the lake right now. And they're very rarely seen. But let's say you've got a much smaller healthy population of an even more rarely seen animal, which might be the Lake Champlain monster. In other words, you could have a healthy population of these animals that are just barely hanging on, that are so rarely seen, and maybe their deaths are a very rare occurrence because they have no natural predators. They're not having to worry about sharks or other large marine predators preying on them in Lake Champlain.
Right.
So they wouldn't have to be worried about attacks from predators. They may be extremely long-lived animals, and a death might be a rare occurrence. So, this is theoretically, you could have a healthy population of champ animals, and they'd be extremely rarely seen. But anyway, getting back to the Champlain Sea, now we have the remains of sturgeons and beluga whales and seals. So the natural question comes up, well, how come they don't find the remains of the Champlain monster in Champlain Sea deposits? Well, my answer to that is that at this point we don't have a complete inventory of the animals that were living in the Champlain Sea. And even the paleontologists that work on this question have said this. And there are a lot of interesting things regarding that idea. One thing you can look at is in trying to get an idea of what the Champlain Sea was like, you can look to a place called the